Hello and welcome to Live United. Living United is about reaching out to one another and really lending a helping hand. And we're fortunate here in the Monadnock region to have great agencies who provide a lot of support to people in need in our region. Today, I'm joined by Mary Kruger. Mary joins us from New Hampshire Legal Assistance, and she is the director of the Domestic Violence Project. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And Mary, I'd like you to share a little bit about the history of New Hampshire Legal Assistance.
Sure. New Hampshire Legal Assistance has been in existence since 1971, and we have been providing poverty legal services for people who are low income in the civil legal area. We basically help people to meet their basic living needs, so people who are facing civil legal issues complicating their ability to meet those needs.
Now, I had a chance to look at some of the YouTube videos about New Hampshire Legal Assistance and your website, and I see that you serve a number of different types of populations. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. We're a statewide program, and we serve a number of our clients are persons with disabilities. They may have mental health issues or other physical disabilities. We serve domestic violence survivors, primarily a lot of women. The majority of the people who access our services are actually women who are living in poverty, and we also serve seniors. We also have a special project right now serving veterans in housing, and those are kind of the range of people that we typically serve.
Can you talk a little bit more about the special project for veterans?
Sure. It's a very new project. Veterans, Inc. Is providing some funds to help prevent homelessness for vets. In particular, this is starting over in the Manchester area. We've hoped to be able to secure some additional funding through the state a couple of years ago to more widely be able to serve the veteran population. That didn't come through, but that's one of our goals down the line.
And you mentioned that you serve a number of single women. Why do you think women tend to be one of your bigger populations?
Well, we don't quite understand that entirely. We did a civil legal needs study a couple of years ago, and we found that the overwhelming majority of our service users are women. We know that 55% of people in poverty in the state of New Hampshire are women, and so there could be a number of social factors that can lead to that. 18% of the women in our survey are single mothers, and there could be unique challenges for single parents where if they don't have the second income coming in, or maybe aren't receiving the full child support that they may be entitled to, that can contribute to living in poverty. So that's one of the reasons, but there's probably other factors that we haven't quite identified entirely.
I know you serve the whole state of New Hampshire, which is amazing. And this, in particular, you have services you provide here in the Monadnock region. Can you share a little bit more about what you're doing here, specifically in the Monadnock region, the types of populations you're serving here?
Sure. We are serving, again, the same types of population that we would statewide. We have a variety of projects that address the kinds of civil legal problems that people have. We have a housing project that helps prevent people from being evicted from their housing. And in particular, we help people who are currently receiving some kind of subsidy to pay for their housing. If someone is to lose that subsidy, if they've been evicted, then it's very difficult for them to be able to get that subsidy back. So we find that that's a high priority kind of case that we should be doing, because that really prevents homelessness. We also have a homelessness project where we try to assist people who are having difficulty in accessing housing. Oftentimes that could be because they don't have the kind of income that they need in order to afford housing, and we will help them to connect with that income, whether it be through helping them to get some kind of disability benefit that they may be entitled to, or some initial local welfare help. We also help people with unemployment benefits, so if they've been wrongly denied their unemployment benefits, we will represent them in administrative hearings to help them to get that benefit. We do our domestic violence advocacy project, representing victims and survivors of domestic and sexual violence who maybe need help in obtaining a protective order, or maybe need help in a divorce or parenting or custody case. We also have a senior project where we help seniors who are being exploited financially, or are facing unfair debt collection, or maybe are being evicted from a nursing home wrongly without the proper processes in place. So you can see we do a wide variety of things. I could go on and on and on, but those are all cases that we do in this Monadnock region. And in fact, last year we served 205 people from this area of the state.
Wow, and how many people do you serve statewide?
That's a good question. I was trying to actually look that up yesterday myself through the database, and I have to say I'm not very good at being able to access that information, but I did find out that we have right now 588 open active cases in the state of New Hampshire. So that those cases could be at any particular phase. Some may be ready to wrap up, but so that's just a snapshot of how many cases we have right now. But I could probably venture to say it's somewhere between 1,000 to 1,200 contacts that we have giving some type of legal service in any given year.
And are all these legal services free, or is there a sliding scale attached to it?
These are all free legal services for people who qualify. Our guidelines are 200% of poverty level. For a family of 4, that would be $47,100 of gross annual income for that, qualifying you for our services for free.
So you provide services on a whole array of issues: unemployment benefits, disability, it sounds like, veterans benefits, if people need them, homelessness. Are there other things that you definitely want to highlight for our audience?
I do. We also do a great deal of impact work. We do policy advocacy in the legislature. We help to draft legislation that we want to help to move forward through the process. We also help defend against legislation that we think could be harmful for low-income people. For example, last year we helped to pass what we call the bed bug law, which is a big problem that probably people are familiar with. And we came up with some legislation that struck a really good balance between providing incentives to both tenants and landlords to deal with the problem together. And it creates a mechanism for accountability, so that we were finding many of our clients who are low income were being required to deal with the problem when it wasn't necessarily their fault to deal with it. And it can cost a lot of money to have to deal with a problem like that. So this legislation really sets out a way for people to deal with that and a process so that everybody following that is on the same page. And it's really a landmark piece of legislation that is probably the first of its kind in the country. So it's probably a model for other states to use. We also defended against particular legislation that would have really weakened our domestic violence laws. They wanted to remove what is called the warrantless arrest provision, where if somebody were to commit an act of domestic violence or violate a restraining order, the police don't need to obtain a warrant if it's clear who the offender is within a 12-hour period. And that really keeps victims safe. And we've had that legislation come up a couple of cycles, and we've been able to help defeat that legislation so that we have strong domestic violence laws in New Hampshire.
Do you know what kind of support you've had from the Monadnock region in terms of advocacy and legislation, and in particular from our representatives and our senators?
Sure, we have great support from actually the state senators. Molly Kelly has been very supportive. on many of the issues that we are working together on. And so we've had some pretty good success. We also work closely with the Crisis Center in this part of the state, the Monadnock Center for Violence Prevention, and their executive director was the chair of the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, and they're a partner of ours in working to defeat legislation like we talked about, the domestic violence related bills or some of the family law bills that might be harmful for victims and survivors. So those are some of the examples I can come up with for partners here.
Do you work with law enforcement at all or other lawyers in the area? Do any lawyers in our area provide any sort of pro bono kind of services?
Oh, absolutely. We have some really dedicated pro bono lawyers, and if I started to name names, I might forget some. So I can think of a handful of really great, committed volunteer lawyers in this community, and they take on a lot, and there's a lot of need. There's not as many lawyers in this area of the state, so you have fewer people to tap into to volunteer to do those cases. So the ones we have are really, caring more than their share of the kinds of work that is needed.
You mentioned that there was about 205 cases, I think, here in the Monadnock region. Can you tell me the type of service those people are in need of here in the Monadnock region?
Sure. I think probably, again, all the range of issues that we talked about, but I think housing in particular is one, is an area that we've had a number of cases in this area of the state. And those cases, actually, I can give you an example of a case a few years ago that I was involved in. It was a woman who had some significant mental health issues, and they were starting to interfere with her ability to maintain her apartment in a way that was in line with what the lease required. She was also on disability benefits and had a fixed income as a result, so she had a subsidy to help her stay in that apartment, and she was facing eviction because the apartment just wasn't, she wasn't able to keep it up because she was suffering symptoms from her mental health. And we were able to work out an agreement where her case manager from Monadnock Family Services worked with us. We met, we came up with a plan, we worked with the landlord to come up with an agreement so that she could get additional resources to get her apartment back to where it needed to be, and she was able to do that, and the case manager, stepped up and helped a great deal with that, and that can be a pretty typical kind of housing case that we might do. Doesn't ever make it to court, but we're using law to back what we're doing, and in that case, it's the Fair Housing Act that was able to be, we could use that as a tool to encourage everybody to come to the table and work on a solution. And that's, in that particular case, kept her and her daughter in their housing. So,
part of the pride in the Monadnock region is that we tend to move towards a wraparound type of service. And what you're describing sounds like a wraparound service where Monadnock Family Services is coming together with New Hampshire Legal Assistance and really embracing and wrapping their arms around a person in need to see how they can best serve them and have impact. And I know the Monadnock Region Wellbeing Report specifically cites that we have a little bit higher rate of homelessness here in the Monadnock region. Mm-hmm. And that we have a lot of single parents here in the Monadnock region. What kind of difference do you feel like you make in the lives of these people?
Well, we would have to ask them, I suppose. But I think, and I have to say that the clients that I work with inspire me on a daily basis. That the things that they are facing in their own lives. The challenges of poverty, or if you're suffering mental health issues, they're really difficult to overcome. And, so for me, I feel like I'm the one who walks away feeling like I've learned something, I've been inspired by this person who has been able to work through, like the person I was telling you about, really suffering symptoms and having to, endure that and be able to get back on track. It's not an easy thing, and when you watch somebody go through those things and you spend time with them and you hear their story, you yourself become inspired. So I'd like to think that I've obviously helped somebody to either maintain their housing or obtain a domestic violence restraining order, or get custody of their children. That's great. For them, obviously, but for me, I guess I just get so much out of it myself that it's hard for me to say.
Now, are all of you lawyers at New Hampshire Legal Assistance?
We're not. Some of us are paralegals, and our paralegals are trained to also do some cases. You can't be in certain courts, but as a paralegal, you can appear in administrative hearings. And a lot of the public benefit arena, so whether we're talking about Social Security or food stamps or family assistance, any of those areas are all administrative law, and they're in an administrative setting. They're not in a courtroom, and so you don't need to actually be a lawyer. And we have extremely talented and dedicated paralegals who can do those cases, which is really great. And we have a few who've been in our program for almost close to 30 years who've been doing this work, and essentially are experts and could probably teach some of the lawyers a thing or two.
Well, it sounds like you have a number of people actually working there. Is there quite a few that are serving these 1,200 people across the state? And how many are serving here in the Monadnock region?
Both. We have an office in Concord and an office in Claremont, and I'm out of the Claremont office. Both of those offices are, within an hour from Keene. So we cover between those two offices this region. And myself, I tend to do more of the domestic violence cases down here. There's another attorney out of Concord who sometimes comes here to do those cases as well. My colleague in the Claremont office does many of the disability cases, unemployment cases in this region. And our Concord office typically will do a lot of the housing cases in this area and keep tabs on that. And I've done some housing cases in this area myself.
So you mentioned you're the director of the Domestic Violence Project,
Right.
For New Hampshire Legal Assistance. Can you talk more about that project and some of the work going on with that, and really its role here in the Monadnock region?
Yes. Again, we work with the Monadnock Center for Violence Prevention, and they refer cases to our program. Actually comes through the pro bono program, and they also will try to either connect the client with an attorney from our program or one of those volunteer lawyers that we talked about in this area. And it's a really great partnership. I often meet my clients there in their office because I don't have a space here, and it's a confidential location where I can meet with a client. And the advocates there, they will help me if I need something faxed. I can call them up, because I'm an hour away. So if I need something from a court case that my client is working with them on, they will, assist with little things like that that actually just, can make things so much more efficient. And they will provide that emotional support that my clients often need in dealing with, leaving an abusive situation, and just the difficulty in going through like a divorce case, which can go on for, a year or more, and just going through all the ups and downs of what that might entail. Having the advocates at MCVP to be there to help support that person and also help connect that person with community services that they might need. Maybe they need help in figuring out how to get food stamps, and maybe they've never had to apply for food stamps before, but now that they've left an abusive situation where they may not have any money because abusers often will hold on to all of the financial resources, they may need to now access the safety net, and the advocates are excellent at helping people to navigate those systems, and so we try to work together on that, and then if they run into a problem accessing that system, maybe they've been wrongly denied, I can step in and do some legal services to help that person. So we all sort of work together, and it really is a great partnership. And in this region, I think it works. It's a great example of how it can work. And statewide, we try to partner similarly with other crisis centers that do the same thing that MCVP does. So, yeah.
You mentioned that part of what you help people with is their safety net needs almost, some of those basic needs that we have, food and shelter. And do you see an increase this time of year at all? Or you're also working on the domestic violence project. Do you see an increase in the number of people coming in really in need of your service this time of year?
It's hard for me to totally gauge that because fortunately I'm somewhat removed from having to be the one to pick up the phone. But I mean, I can tell you that certainly this is a more stressful time of year for people. And so that, especially with domestic violence, it can become a more intense time where there can be more violence occurring. Strangely enough, I mean, I would think MCVP probably would see an uptick in their calls, but what we find is we get fewer people who are actually trying to leave the situation to get a restraining order during this time of year, because my theory anyway is that people are trying to sort of keep things together for the children or whomever to kind of get through the holiday time. It can be a difficult time, it can be a dangerous time for people, but so I think in that area, certainly. And you just mentioned, I mean, the homelessness, people trying to access food stamps were recently reduced because of the federal law that expired. So people are really struggling to make it work right now.
That's why I was curious as to whether you were seeing more people requiring your service, especially in terms of basic needs, because NPR just did a story in New Hampshire as one of the states that had that reduction, particularly in the food stamps. And we had Mindy Cambiar from the 100 Night Shelter on recently, and she talked about the impact on people having to make a choice between their housing and food. And my guess is that that's when you could reach out your hand to help with some of those basic needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, helping people, if they're being prevented from accessing one of those programs because of a misapplication of eligibility requirements or something like that, that's a legal issue that we can deal with. And sometimes there's a really quick fix to that. So sometimes all people need is information, and they, they'll pick up the phone, they'll be able to connect with an advocate who can provide that information over the phone. And sometimes that's enough, but we can't meet the need. We don't have the resources to do that, and that it's a very frustrating thing. The number of people who reach out who we have to say no to because we don't have enough lawyers and advocates to go around for everybody. So what we do try to do because of that, and this is part of our strategic plan, really, is to do the impact work. So not only working in the legislature to change laws to improve things for people in poverty, but also on the rulemaking level for the agencies that are administering these programs to be involved with that so that we can ensure that the rules are fair and that the rules aren't tweaked such that they're going to prevent more people from accessing these programs. And then that trickles down to all of the people who we can't on an individual basis represent because it just as a practical matter, you're never going to meet that need. We also do, impact work through, bringing class action lawsuits. So, for example, if, some years back the Medicaid program wasn't doing what it was supposed to do to help children accessing dental care, preventative care, that they were entitled to. And, so we, after, much thought and trying to work with the state agency, ended up filing a class action lawsuit that actually required the state to make the changes they needed to provide the services for children. So that's the kind of impact work that we try to do so that we can help people in every part of the state to access those kinds of things that they need.
So it sounds like you're making a real difference both at an individual level, but then at our larger population level. And what are some of the other future directions that you think your organization will go in or strategically have to be responsive to?
Well, the reality that I talked about, that we're not going to meet all those needs, but really I think the direction we need to go in is to be thinking about that kind of impact work and how we can make fundamental change at the policy level so that more people can access the services they need, have a stable situation, because if you're not able to access your basic living needs, you can't do much else. And once you start to meet those needs, then you can start to think about, how do I, be able to get myself out of poverty? Not just how am I going to feed my kids next week, but, to be able to, as an individual, be able to think their way through their own issues. And I think we really try to think that strategically because we've, our program, a couple of years ago, because of the recession and some lost dollars due to that and a reduction in the state funds that we had received, we had to actually lay off almost half our program. So it was extremely frustrating. And we look at this nationally. 45% of our children in this country are living in poverty, and we're cutting all the programs that are trying to, address the issue. Sometimes you feel like, are we ever really going to see that change? But there's a lot of real good energy, and the Monadnock United Way is a huge supporter of us, and that is, that helps to make up the difference for when we lose these other kinds of funds. But I think that we all need to be working together to figure out what the solutions are and not just running in our hamster wheel, all having to address that. I think we're also consumed with having to address that immediate need of that person who is, homeless or fleeing domestic violence. We all need to be able to step back, take a breath, look at the big picture, and figure out how we're incrementally going to change policy so that we can ensure that people are able to, come out of poverty, really, get the education and all of the things that, that they should be entitled, health care, all of those things.
What do you think the impact of your work has been on individuals in terms of this policy making that you're doing here in the Monadnock region? What would you like to think the impact of that is?
Well, I would like to think that, that victims and survivors who are fleeing domestic violence have the ability to access the services that they need through the criminal justice system, that abusers are being held accountable because we have strong domestic violence laws, and are able to defeat the attempts to chip away and weaken them, I think that has a real impact on the ground for safety, for victims, so that they, they may be at risk of being killed. And if they are able to have police response and have an abuser incarcerated immediately to stop the violence, that's a huge impact for people. About 1 in 3 women in New Hampshire and 1 in 4 men in New Hampshire have experienced some kind of intimate partner violence in their lifetime. So it's a huge problem, and it's I think across the state and in this community as well. So that's one way I think our policy making impacts people here. Another example I would just add, this is something I think that people don't even think about. We work with the Public Utilities Commission and their rulemaking process, and that commission is responsible for overseeing the energy assistance programs that provide energy assistance to low-income people in the Monadnock region, and that is helping people to pay their light bill and, in some cases keep the heat on, that kind of thing. And that policy work, which we sort of do quietly in the background, it results in hundreds of thousands of dollars to people. And actually in this area, I believe that it's about $380,000 of assistance that people received in 2012 through that work at the Public Utilities Commission. So it sounds sort of, something you can't quite put your fingers on, but it's actually really important impact work that we do.
It's incredible impact work you're doing. Now tell me, do they have legal assistance like this anywhere else in the country? Does every state want to have one of these, or is this unique to New Hampshire?
This isn't unique. The legal aid programs were established late 60s, early 70s through money through the federal government, the Legal Services Corporation. And they were designed specifically out of the Johnson administration to assist people in poverty who were having civil legal issues and meeting their basic needs. And the Legal Services Corporation money in the 90s actually changed their rules to restrict the kind of work that the legal aid programs were doing on an impact level, to restrict programs from lobbying or programs from filing class action lawsuits, to make bigger incremental changes. And so in New Hampshire and around the country, these legal aid programs all faced a real choice about, are we now going to have to just be doing those individual cases, which are important, but for the reasons we talked about, the impact work is equally as important. And in New Hampshire, as in many other parts of the country, we actually bifurcated our program, and we created a new nonprofit to just receive those federal monies. That's the Legal Advice and Referral Center. They're like our sister program, and that's actually a trend that happened across the country. So there's in this state, we really have 3 main nonprofits that do the legal services work. Other states have more. Others have just 1. So it just really varies across the country, but we're not unique. We might be unique for other reasons. But
is there anything that does make you unique, you feel?
Well, I think because we're in New Hampshire, we're unique. I think one of the things that makes us unique is that we actually have adversaries who compliment us, for the way that we do our work and the way that we handle ourselves. One of my colleagues recently, he just was wrapping up. His name is Alan Linder, and I'll be embarrassed that I'm talking about this, but he's wrapping up long litigation that we had done at the men's prison. I'm not even sure when that was a lawsuit that was filed many years ago. And it was for prisoners to access mental health services that they needed. And he worked tirelessly on that issue. And when they were wrapping it up, because pretty much the plan that came out was implemented and no longer needed New Hampshire legal assistance to be sort of breathing down their neck, I guess, based on the court orders. Alan, they threw him a party. They did, and it was not like "see you later, we're so glad you're gone," but they really were going to miss him, you know. And this is, you know, the lawyer that sued them. So I think that makes us unique, and that's a story that I think can be said about a number of the attorneys in our program.
You're doing some amazing things. Is there any message that you really want to send out to the public in terms of your service? And in particular, I think of like 211 is something that United Way support, and service links are something that we work with, both locally here and across the state. How do you connect with them, and how do people connect with you?
Well, I can tell you, intake is a challenge for everybody, you know, and I really admire the people at 211. We do also coordinate with them to some extent. You know, legal needs is, I think, the #1 issue that people are calling 211 about. And they've been a great partner in helping us to identify people who are homeless and in need of legal assistance to access, like local welfare or some other benefit that they might need. For individuals who are looking to access our program, they can call our 800 number, which is 1-800-562-3994, or they can also go online. And this is a new thing that we have. It's a really great intake for people who have access to the internet. It's nhlegalaid.org. And they can apply for legal services right there and find out if they're qualified financially. They just type in their problem and someone will get back to them. And that's often easier when people don't have minutes on their phone or whatnot to wait on hold. So that's usually where I send people who have access to the internet.
I apologize, because I've caught a little cold.
Yeah.
And I do want to let the viewers know that we will have the information posted for you to see, to remind you. But again, if they do want to contact you, is it best to do that through 211? Is it best to do it through calling direct?
Calling direct is the best way to access us. Yes, because 211 would probably just refer you to us, so I think that's the best way.
And they certainly can feel free to call the helpline at the Monadnock United Way, and we can help direct them to you as well. I want to thank you for joining us. Any final messages for the public?
Well, just everyone have a happy and safe holiday, and thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, Mary. And I want to remind everyone that we would like you to share your story about how you're living united, and you can contact us through liveunited@muw.org to share your story, and then we will pick a story each week to share on air, and you will receive a t-shirt for this story you've shared with us. Again, I want to remind you to give, volunteer. You've certainly heard Mary talk about advocating. Live United. Thank you for joining us.